Hello and welcome back to Speak. After a fairly lengthy hiatus, we're back with a new season, and we're absolutely chuffed to be kicking it off with the awesome Stuart Hughes. Now, Stuart, no pressure, but your Speak episode last time was one of our most viewed episodes, so proper looking forward to hearing what you want to talk about. So, by all means, fill us in. What's on your mind?
Cool. Well, Crystal, Elisa, it's nice to actually be invited on this time. I think when I came on last time, I'd invited myself, pretty much because of something I was listening to and wanted to have a bit of a conversation on it. And yeah, I think it's very nice to flattering, really, considering some of the other people you had on the podcast to know that yeah, simple old me was a popular choice. But yeah, so I thought. Well, I had a working title, and then I revised it a little bit. So my working title was "How do we unfuck safety?" And that was based on I listened to a podcast called Unfucking Work, and it's not a normal podcast that I listen to, but two men were on it that one I know and one I've interacted with. So a chap called Sam Conniff and another chap called John Alexander. So Sam Conniff, author, wrote Be More Pirate, How to Be More Pirate, and is now leading the uncertainty experts, and has had
Oh,
quite a
yeah. I
quite an
knew his name.
influential bit on my life, to be honest with you, from interactions, meeting him, and other stuff. So definitely recommend listeners check out uncertainty experts and Sam himself. And then John Alexander wrote a book called Citizens, which I listened to last year, and its basic premise is how do you change the narrative from everybody being seen as consumers to this idea of citizenship and global citizenship and taking effective action. So I saw that those two people were on a pod together, and I thought, crumbs, I haven't actually seen them in the same room together. And they make a joke of it, saying it's the first time that they've proven that they're not one and the same person. And yeah, so I was listening to that, and I thought, oh, okay, I'm feeling the vibe for this. And then I thought, actually, let's try and be a bit more positive. So really what I want to talk about is, as a profession, are we focusing on the right things? And they'll give you the rationale for why I think it's an important topic. So every day, 7,500 people exit the planet because of work-related disease, work-related ill health, or work-related accidents. And that number, if we're brutally honest with ourselves, has got to get worse before it will get better. And why I say that is because that is a gross underestimate, because there are lots of parts of the globe that aren't reporting
Yeah.
fatalities, work-related ill health, work-related disease. Now, if that number kind of scares you, or it's difficult to kind of comprehend, you know, 3,000 people almost all told lost their life in 9/11. So to try and give it some comparative numbers, you can kind of scale up from there. And I know they're not quite the same thing, but when you think of kind of big scale loss, it's quite helpful to draw some parallels. And I just think that actually, across the board, we're seeing in some parts of the world numbers plateau, and it makes me question: Are we looking in the right direction? Have we lost our way a little bit as a profession? And are we, well, like I say, are we focused on the right things? And I thought that would make an interesting topic. I thought the three of us could probably have an interesting conversation on it. And I'll give you an example of perhaps where this comes from. I don't know if you've ever been provided with a box of those kind of safety cards. I've got about 4 or 5 different boxes from different people that have done some gamification of safety. Some of it's great, some of it not so much. And I was reading a question out on one of these the other day to my girlfriend. It was basically said, like, what is it that stops us talking about safety? And then the follow-up question for it was, how could we make a conversation about safety the best conversation you've ever had in your life? And my girlfriend said, well, that's sad, isn't it? Imagine that being the best conversation you've ever had in your life. And I thought, fair as a premise, but actually, how do we normalize talking about safety? How do we normalize talking about risk? How do we normalize and humanize it? How do we stop kind of this treating people not as adults, but how do we help them make the effective decisions that help them protect themselves in the work environment, give them all of the information to make good decisions? And I was listening to something the other day, and they were talking about how, in essence, if you're hungry, late, tired, or angry, you're likely to make a bad decision. And I was like, okay, I could tick one or two of those things off on a daily basis. So it's not surprising that in the complex world of work across the globe, we lose people. But actually, how do we make an impact on that? Because I think fundamentally, the majority of people that I know that are in the safety profession are there because they really want to reduce harm, and they want to reduce those awful outcomes. And then you think, well, actually, there's quite a lot of dialogue on LinkedIn about, well, should we be doing well-being? Should we be doing mental health initiatives? Should we be doing all of these are the different things that people talk about? And have we lost our way and focusing on, significant incidents and fatalities? And
there are definitely two branches of that I could go to. The minute you're talking about should we be doing well-being, I think that's curve one. On the first curve, as I was taking in everything you were saying, Stuart, and the reason, not like us to stop someone in flow, but you're going to branch off so many possible conversations, I can feel it. I need to grab one of them before they dissipate. I think one of the first things that's on my mind as you're talking through this problem statement is, how do we make safety the best conversation ever? I think it goes a step back from there. The reason we can't, at this point in time, make safety the best conversation that there is because we're not brave enough, this is just my opinion, to have what I call the dirty conversation, which is you can't stop it all. You've mentioned there about hungry, tired, didn't sleep, didn't eat, didn't do whatever. There are so many things in a human that we can influence, but more that we can't, right? Absolutely more that we can't. We're never going to be able to stop a dad or a mum coming to work and their baby being up all night with tonsillitis and they have not slept. We're never going to be able to affect that. So I think the reason it's very difficult is because it feels contradictory to say, we love it, we're here to reduce harm, we're going to stand in front of everything we could possibly stand up. And then in the second breath we say, but we know we can't do it all. And it feels jarring to say the two. So how can you be passionate about the reduction? And how can you then say in the second breath, you can't stop it all? And I think that's the bit that we fall over the curb of that and we don't get to the path, because everyone gets stuck at that bit. Is it zero harm? Isn't it zero harm? And I'm very good at articulating this on a daily basis in every room I can, even if it's not relevant to the conversation. Zero harm is a myth. We must stop talking about zero harm. Harm reduction is 100% possible. And I think that's one of the reasons. And Stuart, I had this conversation today with an incredible woman that I work with called Helen. And if you're listening, you know who you are. And we were talking about one of the really interesting things that big businesses do. And I don't know if this happens in your day-to-day, but you see typically big businesses get big internal comms departments. And they say, well, we will comms the stuff, right? You do your thing, you do your work, you do your campaign, we'll comms the stuff. Actually, what's kind of missing is you allowing a really super interesting, very passionate safety professional to say, why? Don't just give me the new process. Don't just give me the policy. Allow somebody, and I'll say it, like me, to stand up and say, where did this piece of work start? I'll tell you where it started. In my gut, with research, because something happened, because we will not tolerate accepting loss where we could control it, and allow you to land that bigger, better message around safety. And then, so interesting, the big conversation between me and Helen and one of her team was then, we had a big passionate conversation about where a piece of work came from. And I said, that's the problem. that passion gets blocked by process and by a department over here saying, we'll just send it out. You don't get the passion, because actually, it's like you say, it's a very good conversation. It's a massively passionate, emotive, amazing debate to be having. We just don't really get to have it. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, and I think there's a really interesting piece there which I've been kind of pondering around recently, which is kind of how we humanize this stuff. How do we humanize the messaging? And actually, rather than, yeah, like you say, the press release or the corporate comms or the, you know, instant delete your email, like actually here's a minute long video that just tells you why it's important. And, you know, that bit that you've just kind of done that says like, yeah, this has come from my gut or from my heart, or, you know, from the research piece, or actually like we're brutally wounded by something that's happened, and we can't tolerate, you know, a rinse and repeat of that. So this is why, you know, we need you to do these things. And I think the other thing that's in that for me is which I've been toying with a lot at the moment is consistency. So and it comes back to my work environment, right? So I did a talk recently with for the Institute of Civil Engineers, and I basically did this piece on consistency. That is, Formula One team, McLaren, do a world record pit stop, and it's 1.8 seconds, and it's phenomenal, right? Go and watch the video of it on YouTube. Like it's a mad, it's a mad bit of like just skill, and it's so good that the video that's out there, like at the end, there's an Alfa Romeo mechanic who's watching it, and he's just like, you know, even he's impressed.
Yeah.
And then, you know, a weekend or two later in another race, it goes wrong. 5 seconds, you know, really alters the course of their race and alters everybody else's finishing positions. And some teams benefit from that, and some teams lose out as a result. And they're the same people. Okay, different environment, but same people, same task. But it made me think, actually, the value of consistency is, you know, in the sport, the value of consistency is knowing when you can bring a car out, how long it will be stationary for, and where it will end up back out in the race with, you know, a certain degree of certainty, because you know that each time they come in, they're going to do it in, let's say, 2.5 seconds, right? What would happen if everybody's interaction with their safety team was a 2.5 second interaction? And what I mean by that is not the time, but every time they had the interaction with the safety person, they knew what they were getting. They knew the certainty of the outcome. They knew the consistency of recommendations. They knew the consistency of the dialogue. They knew the consistency of what somebody was talking about. And I thought that's really interesting as a premise for the profession. And maybe if, you know, we focused on, you know, what was right rather than who was right in the arguments that we see going round and round on socials.
Yeah.
Maybe we might drive more consistency in the profession. And maybe if we drove more consistency in the profession, we might start to chip away at, you know, what is ultimately I think it's a terrifying number of people that are harmed irreversibly, when I'd suggest a big proportion of that could be controlled.
Elisa, I can see you brewing on some thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah, I get the consistency bit, I get the passion bit, all of that. And that's lovely. But I really think we fall down where, like, look at these numbers of people dying. And it's because, like, where's the critical risk management? Where's the critical control management? And that's not sexy, and that's not a new framework, and that's not cool. But that's actually not even the basics. That's not the basics, because people aren't doing that as basic.
Yeah.
Like we don't get educated in that in our curriculums. Like we don't. I know I bang this fucking drum all the time. And I thought I'd have a different tune in 2024. Turns out I don't. But like, you know, I was reading a post on LinkedIn today by I think he's either Canadian, Australian, some Thompson guy, but anyway, he was talking about this thing of, okay, we've now kind of a lot of, I suppose, heavy industry, mining, all this kind of crap has moved towards critical risk management, but he's like, we're still not talking about critical control management. And I definitely know there are safety professionals that if I went and spoke to them about that, they'd be like, oh yeah, no, we control our risks. But if you try and drill down into the critical stuff and even the consistency about that, or even if you ask them, you know, what are your critical risks? How are they controlled? How confident are you those control works? And what is that confidence based on? They wouldn't be able to answer it. And so it's nice to be all like, oh, we're passionate and we want to reduce harm and all the rest, but we don't know how to do the ABCs of what I would say are the ABCs.
And that's the interesting point for me, right? This is probably, if we circle back to the start of the conversation and we talk about whether we're focusing on the right things, like actually, like, let's make the fundamentals the attractive bit of the profession. Let's make that the cool stuff to talk about, and actually let's try and elevate the discussion on those parts of it, that then once you've got, you know, foundational stuff in place that enables you to do the other things about that are all linked into the systems, the kind of more holistic stuff, the stuff that links into the well-being, the stuff that links into the human performance piece, the stuff that links into the mental health stuff and all of that stuff. But if our agenda is pulled so broad that the fundamentals and those kind of foundational keystone pieces aren't being delivered on, because we're all looking at shiny stuff or we're having conversations of new and exciting elements. And I think some of that stuff in the technological world will come and will be exciting and will help. But fundamentally, like, you know, we can't build our castle on the sand, can we? So I think what you've just said there, Elise, is like really, really spot on. Like that, actually, how do we get to the crux of these things and engineer those conversations at the top of organizations and then throughout, so it permeates, so that it's not just the, you know, at the top,
and because
but actually the frontline people have the understanding as well.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know, was it in a conversation with you, Stuart, before we were chatting, but like, we have not fucking made up new ways to kill people. Like, it's not like we're
still killing
people.
Yeah, exactly.
It's phospholites, it's moving plants, it's all that, like, oh my God.
And that goes back to that fundamentals piece, doesn't it? The critical control points is one, but that fundamentals, one of the things that I have found myself being asked whenever I change professions or whenever I do mentoring is like, what's the consistent thing when you go into a new leadership role? It's the same stuff. You go into organizations, it's the same stuff that's missing, the absolute fundamentals. How are you hurting people? Where are you hurting people? What are you doing to stop those specific things? Like, what are your roots? And everyone's like, oh, how
what are you being distracted by?
How confident are you? Yeah.
Like, what's all the shit you're doing that does not impact this at all?
And here's the interesting thing, right? Is I've definitely in my history been, you know, can you come and sit in and be the specialist in the room, Crystal? Of course I can. And then we've done 10 things. That bad thing happened, we've done 10 things. And then you go, cool. How does the 10 things hit the thing? And do the 10 things fix the thing that happened? Oh no, but we did 10 things. Okay, yeah, no, get it. But what was the root cause?
You've been very busy, love.
This is great. And I love your 10 things. Yay to the 10 things. But I would prefer one punchy, spot-on action that tackles a root to 10 things that peripherally look good. And I think it is, how are you training? If you're who are you expecting? And it can be a plethora of people in your organization. It all depends how you want to run. But have you made the people competent that are doing an investigation? Do people know how to look for a cause? And then are they empowered with the right resources to then tackle and remove the cause? As you say, Lisa, we're not killing people in new ways. And so I think that fundamentals piece is crazy to me. And then that whole thing about critical risk management, I have to say, I thought when I joined where I am now, I had to do a fairly in-depth food safety qualification, right? I don't know if it was, I think it was 2 weeks or something. And embedded in the standards for food safety is a process called HACCP, right? And it assesses the critical control points, not all of the control points, that's all fine, but there are really big moments of like, if this one thing fails, you have a major problem. And you have to document, stay close to, review your critical controls. And as I was doing this qualification, I was like, I have done this for 20 years. And I can't remember a framework that's standardized in any other area of safety that says end to end of your processes, where are your critical controls and how close are you? We say, write a management system, and it can be a one-pager, like the famous one at Luton Airport, or it can be 75 million pages because we can't articulate ourselves, and neither of them are helpful. And so, yeah, the critical control things, we could absolutely benefit from a proper framework in the profession to say, you go in, this is what you do. And actually, something like a HACCP process for safety overall would be better than a generic management system that just says, please see document 7 for manual handling.
Yeah, and there's an interesting.
That felt so good. Thank you, guys.
But like, it's cathartic, isn't it? Like, it's really enjoyable.
It's so cathartic.
I think that there's a piece there that as you get to your kind of 10 actions, or they've done their 10 commandments type piece. There's okay, great, but like, what's our outcome tolerance? Like, are we happy with what happened?
Yeah.
And are we just doing those things to show that we've done something and we're quite happy to let that happen again? And actually, this is a point in the conversation where we don't have within safety very often, because actually you might say, given what we do, that stuff's tolerable. It's not ideal. It's not great, but it's within the risk tolerance of the organization, actually. Like, it's not, we haven't killed somebody, we haven't maimed them, we haven't given them a life-changing injury. Yes, they've had some stresses and strains and it's suboptimal, but actually that might just be part of it.
Yeah.
In a very, very honest conversation, like, if you work in a kitchen, you burn yourself, right? That's kind of, it happens. Like, you don't intentionally wander around burning yourself, right? Like, that wasn't my MO when I was chefing, but it would definitely happen. And you're not going to eliminate that, right? So you can kind of investigate it all day long and blah, 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 but fundamentally, that's probably just within the risk tolerance of the fact that you're in the kitchen and you've got humans working with some hot things, and periodically they might burn themselves. Yeah. And actually, that might be a helpful conversation, because we could stop wasting a lot of time and going, okay, well, we don't really need to do much about that because that's just in the wheelhouse of normal. We're not going to get overly excited about that. Okay, cool. Actually, you slip over on some oil that somebody's spilled and you break an arm. Less cool. Not something we're prepared to happen.
Not so cool, guys.
Oh yeah, not so cool. Outcome could be worse. We're going to spend a bit more time, but not just doing stuff for the sake of doing stuff. We're going to very targeted say, actually, what's the single thing that we can do to implement containment? Okay, cool. Now I love your little hand clap, because it was kind of that bit of where you went, right, this is what we need to solve, and this is the thing that's coming in to solve it. Bang. Like, that was a very nice visual. If you're not watching this and it's just on audio, then you missed it, but it was lovely. And I think that I suppose these are just some of the things that have been buzzing around my brain, and things I've been listening to have sparked it off, and then different kind of conversation pieces on LinkedIn. I think there is almost like a pull for people to say, actually, like, I really want permission just to go back to basics and do those fundamentals really, really well, and be able to kind of be proud of how well I do those fundamentals, because they're making a difference. And maybe we could just talk about that for a bit, rather than some of the bigger and brighter things that get spoken about. And I thought, what better platform than to come on with two incredible ladies who are doing amazing work, and have had some great guests on and done some really thought-provoking stuff, to kind of say, actually, like, do we are we shy of this? Because actually sometimes if you kind of walked into an organization and went, it's this simple, you'd feel like you were kind of robbing them. Do you know what I mean? They might ring the police and be like, there's a robbery going on here. We're paying this guy a load of money and he's told us stuff that seems so simple. It can't be true.
I think the two things that are on my mind as we say that is when we talk about the basics and the fundamentals, it's when we frame it like that, sounds super basic, right?
Yeah.
The honesty is it's actually very complex to get the basics done very well. And to your point earlier, Stuart, consistently.
Yep.
And the other thing that's not said is actually, guys, if you think about how martial arts are studied in places like Japan, it's the one move, and you will sit for months and you do the one move until it is perfect. And then when it all comes together after years and years, it looks like, oh my God, they can do everything. No, we just did one thing perfectly every single time. And the thing that we forget to say, particularly to sort of budding or those people just coming up, is you have no idea the benefit this will bring. This isn't like go back to basics because you should, because we're being martyrs and we're the oldies. This is, dude, you want to see those stats change? Forget the fancy. Forget all of the titles and the different ways that you're going to phrase new and, differently and all the, forget it. Just forget the lot. If you look at your stats right now, A, are they clear? Are they looking at everything from the tasks that cause the most issues, the locations, the job roles? Are you genuinely dicing down into how am I hurting people? Then you get awesome at investigation, proper investigation of trends and of incidents. You will walk into whatever room you need to in 2 years' time with a different amount of harm. You have to. And so it sounds boring, but it's very complex. And it sounds like, a paper exercise. Not. You will go in and you will reduce harm. If you are genuinely wanting to help people where you work, get this nailed. Be the expert. And then there's room after that to do whatever, build it. But the basics are complex.
Yeah, I think it's that language piece again of the words we use matter. When you say basics, you think, oh, simple and boring, but it's not.
Yeah.
But then there was another piece, it was around that critical control management thing I was reading again today, and it was to that part of, do your investigations really well, all that stuff, which is grand. But it almost tends to stop there. We go, we've investigated, we've sorted it. And then this person in the comments was like, do organizations value building memory? Like building memory within the business. So like how often you kind of go, how many times do we have to learn the same lesson? Like how many times does the same thing go wrong?
Yeah.
And we're not like building memory into our processes, into our staff, into our people. And there was actually this phrase that I had read back when I was doing my higher diploma, being like, this is a fucking waste of time. But I was doing an assignment on, what was that place you had that went for Bunfield, something?
Bunfield, yeah.
And it was about allowing organizational amnesia to set in. And I was like, oh, I love that. What a great fucking phrase.
Yeah.
Organizational amnesia. And yeah, I don't think we focus on either of those either. It's just like, yeah, we've done, we fixed, move on. And it just fades until it happens again.
It's interesting, isn't it? So I think that, and I'm glad you kind of circled us back, because I think the HACCP conversation's really, really interesting, where the key bit in that is critical. It's not like every single control point. It's not document so much stuff that you're actually off injured from carrying the documentation around. It's actually like, here's the stuff that's critical. Now, actually, like, if we're really honest, there's only 3 critical things in this quite complex thing, but actually these are the 3 bits that are still the 3 bits that probably would have harmed you if you were working in the factory in the 60s, and probably harmed you in, earlier than that, right? I don't have that long history back into safety, but I was reading a really interesting or listening probably to an audio book that was talking about kind of the conditions of workhouses and children in workhouses in like Victorian times, maybe early 1900s, and some of these people that stopped, children from working in these environments through going through the courts and stuff. And it was really, really phenomenal in terms of, I suppose, how they brought to life the conditions of people. And I think this is, to the organisational amnesia piece, and this is where I was going with this. I don't know about you, but stories from the Bible. I'm not a massively religious person, but I was taught them at school and whatnot. I can remember loads of them. Good Samaritan, water into wine, Noah's Ark. I can remember odd Greek fables and the Trojan horse and all of these kind of things. Well, actually, what's the narrative arc of what's happening within your organisation that actually in another 10 or 15 years' time, somebody that, has only been there for a year would know the story of the crane incident or, whatever it might be, but they'd have that ability to talk about something that happened in the past, which influences the way that the organisation acts and operates today and in the future. And I wonder if there's something in that about taking that pause and saying, actually, not only have we done the investigation, put the fixes into place, but we've also developed the narrative arc so that people not only who are impacted by it, but actually everybody else in the organisation has a very, very clear story around a specific incident, what happened, why we've implemented the additional control measures, at what point we might remove the additional control measures and how we got comfortable. And actually the ability to communicate that as humans to human might just be more impactful as reflective anecdotes than, the kind of cut and finish piece of bish bash bosh investigation done. I've investigated 100% of all the things that reported, aren't I? Good. And I just think that for me just feels like a really important conversation that we should be having. So I feel like we've really moved off of are we focusing on the right things, but hopefully we've kind of pulled the thread through as we've had the conversation.
I think we've nailed that, because I think we've actually answered that question. Are we focusing on the right things? And although we didn't expand on what we are focusing on, you sort of briefly licked the topic there's lots of things going on, there's lots of distracting books, there's lots of things that you could dig into, there's lots about, and it does drag you in the how complex can we make this topic. Are we focusing on the right things? Do you know what your risks are? Do you know what your critical controls are? Do you know how to do a very good investigation and remove your cause?
And go back to that one of how confident are you and what is that confidence based on?
Yeah.
I love that.
So I think
Can I just challenge on that, Crystal? Sorry to just talk over you. That's really rude of me. But when we say you, is this all on us? Or is this actually, when we say you, are we talking about the organisation? The people within it, the leaders. Do you know what I mean? Because there's a and I'm not trying to be critical about what you've just said there. But I think, we've kind of spoken about the importance of language and actually how kind of when you talk about basics, everyone goes, oh, cool, really? But that bit of I probably do want to have all of those things that you've just said, like confidence built on something solid, like rock solid. I could stand up in front of anybody and not be embarrassed about what I was saying. Yes, I understand the critical controls within my organisation that are controlling the critical risks that we've identified. And actually, there are not so many of them that I couldn't, recite them if I was, if I had to.
Yeah.
But actually, don't want that knowledge just to sit with me or within the safety team within the organisation. I want it to be understood and felt more broadly so that it is acted upon and actively communicated, amongst the workforce and the leadership. And I suppose that you're going to tell me now I wasn't saying you as the safety profession. But I suppose I just wanted to talk through it.
I think there's two bits to this, isn't there? Which is, we are an expert. It is down to us, I think, to define what good looks like, share it, and allow competence to spread, and to say, what is a good level of confidence? We've spoken a lot about investigation, but let's take that as a really, really great example. You could probably do an all right investigation with no training. If you were bothered by an incident and you were given it as a manager to say, I don't know how this thing happened, you'd be like, oh, let me go and have a look. Conversations, you'd have interviews without knowing you're having interviews by talking to everybody. You could probably do a pretty good investigation. That bit about being an expert to say, well done, you've got to a base level of a cause. You've got to an immediate cause, probably. If you're pretty thorough, you've probably got to an underlying cause. It's us that says, did you know that typically underneath that again, you can broaden that thinking. If you've seen this incident several times over, this is us stood back and guiding. If you've seen this incident several times over, right, there is usually something underneath, and it's a bigger conversation that you need backing to have, and probably need us to be able to back you to say, yeah, this is what we would call a root cause. This is management pressure. This is time in the workplace. This is resource focused. They have massive conversations. So I think it's us to define what great looks like, right? Because that's what we're really, really good at. And it's us to guide the organisation to do so. And I'll tell you what was on my mind, definitely as we were on the 9-min countdown, is we can say to an organisation, without being too close, if we wanted to be sort of really helicopter in the organisation, all major incidents are investigated. We're back to that fundamentals part, right? So, yeah, is it all happening? Yeah, fine. We've got these pieces of paper. Now, can you do an investigation into an RTA, honestly, a proper investigation, without footage? You don't have telematics in your vehicles because you're a small organisation. So you'd say, well, I spoke to Barry, who was the driver, and he said this person came out of nowhere and he T-boned me. And you go, okay, investigation says person. You haven't equipped anybody to do an investigation, but they probably don't know that that's, you can only do basics. We're not equipping anybody and saying, what's a good standard of evidence? And it's proportionate, right? Big incident, lots of investigation, lots of cause. Medium, same. Minor, you might just say, that's in my risk appetite. We work at a paper factory, we expect paper cuts. We're not going to investigate them, right? But when it gets bigger, I think it is for us to define and to push. And I think in my career so far, I have seen really, really well-meaning, decent people say, I've set up a risk matrix and I handle all of my risk matrices in these ways. And we've gone in to go, show me, this is amazing, well done. I can love that you got here by yourself. And they've gone and they've been able to demonstrate without sharing anything. Oh my God, no, we really need to help you define what really good measures are, what really good critical measures are. And that's through no fault of anybody's other than us as experts can't be everywhere at all the time. So I think, is it an us? No, not to execute at all. Is it the reason why in legislation it says that we have to write a safety management system? We're supposed to define what great looks like, right? And I think we spent too long probably creating a black book that makes us look like super ninja people that no one could do our job. Yes, they can. Yeah, they can. Most people could be a safety professional with not too much work as long as they cared about what they were looking after. So yeah, that's me. That's where I've landed today. I've needed speak in my life, Elisa, obviously. and a bit of Stuart. Come on now. Yeah.
Hey, just before we do the wrap up, and Elisa, I apologise for this in advance, but I just want to give you some props because I've been watching, the work that you've been doing on getting your community together in your geographical location. Because I remember the conversations of I'm super frustrated, nothing's happening, like why can't I get these people together, blah 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 blah. And I know, we probably the three of us as a collective and probably some other people inputted to put the challenge statement back on your doorstep and say, well, if you can't see it, be it and make it happen. And you've gone and done it, right? And
before you go too far, I have to go to fucking tap in like 4 months. They'll be like, what is he talking about? We haven't heard. So I've done like the very, like, I've work to do. But yes,
Well,
shout out to the Safety Link Ireland people.
It's
Come
more than
on.
anyone did before you.
Exactly right. You've got to start somewhere, and I think the fact that you just went, all right, well,
Fuck it.
I'm going to do it. Like fair play, and I think, you know, whether that's a super consistent bang bang bang, or just the fact that that's all together and you've got that network now when periodically you come together, like, but it's cool. And I think the reason why I wanted to just flag it was, like, we've all got the power to do that. You know, the mechanisms are there now, and, you know, we see we're probably more connected than ever with a more diverse range of people within our professional community. And this is why I love what you're doing on the pod as well, because it gives people like this absolute freedom to come in and say, actually, I want to put this challenge statement out there, or I want to just have this discussion, or this thing professionally is on my mind. And you're not, you know, attributed to your workplace or other affiliated organizations or anything else. You just come in as you, the human that does the work in the profession, and it gives us the opportunity to speak really freely and openly. And, you know, what I've seen through this is it generates some really interesting conversation and discussion, and you link and a whole other, like, group of like-minded people together, or people that actually say, I disagree with that. And here's the healthy critical thinking. And I think that's just my kind of final thought piece, really, was I really want the profession to demonstrate that critical thinking it just, like, with a bit of respect for all the parties involved that are playing, like, if we can play nicely, but we should be challenging ourselves, because I think that's part of why I wanted to come on and talk about, are we focusing on the right things? Because I think sometimes people say, you know, they're trying to say that, but they're not really saying it in a way that's palatable for the person that's really put all their eggs in this other basket. So actually, can we, you know,
I've taken your basket and I've smashed it on the ground with all
absolutely. Like, here's the omelette. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's a bit grim at times, isn't it? And I think we could just say, actually, there's a better way to do this, to embrace the challenge, to have the critical conversation, to say, actually, well, we can sit on either end of the position, and we might not agree, but here we go.
But I think that's, it's my favourite part. And actually, Stuart, when we came up with Speak, it was that everyone has a voice, everyone has an opportunity here to voice it. And when we came up with the words underneath, it took us 2 seconds. The vital three is open, honest, and this is a learning space. And that's exactly what this is meant to be, that open debate. And like you say, you could get to a point that at the end of this, Stuart, you're like, you know, I don't think it's us, or I don't think they're the fundamentals, Crystal. And I actually think that's awesome, because there are so many ways to create greatness, not just one.
Wow.
Well, any closing thoughts from you, Elisa?
No, I don't think I think I need to go away now and have a little bit of a think. I think I'm overwhelmed at the first episode back. I'm like, Jesus, my brain's not fucking at the races at all. So can't even get my timer going.
Well, on that note, I think thank you very much for that sort of wrap summary, Stuart, and also the reminder to the listeners that this is about sharing. And lots of the conversations that typically happen under our thread, sometimes they can get tasty, and that's not what we're after. We're after really great debate. And actually, if anybody is listening to this, disagrees, or has a really great topic they think needs the same level of air, please reach out. Please come on and take the speak seat.
I dare you. Come on and take the speak seat. Come on.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for joining us. It is our pleasure to be back. Stuart, thank you so much for joining us again for a really, really great discussion. And we hope to see you guys in 2 weeks when we'll be discussing something else. Thanks very much.
See ya.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.